In the race for the White House. Let's break down the polls of the presidential election this week. Polling expert John Johnson here with Edgeworth Economics and the author of the book Everydata.
So we saw this week is Hillary Clinton continuing to have leads both in the national polls and in a number of the battleground state polls across the board. Support leaving Donald Trump his continues sort of unabated. Particularly, his base generally is sort of non-college educated white voters. He's got to call on more independents. Generally, he has more older voters, and as those constituencies, also start to erode for him, that forebodes some pretty big problems for him with the general election if some of those numbers don't start to turn around.
Donald Trump has been playing down the poll numbers on the campaign trail. Does he have reason to do so?
Look, there is, of course, always, can be some skepticism about certain polls or individual polls, but the notion broadly that when the picture is this consistent across the board with just about all of the major polling organizations, when you look at the trends and you see this kind of trend, I think it would be unwise to ignore the message that the polls are sort of showing, which is sort of a widening lead for Hillary Clinton. That said, there's always caveats. There are certain polls that are more biased liberal versus conservative. There are certain times where the way questions asked can be problematic. So the way you generally get around that is by being careful and thoughtful, but looking at the polls in their totality.
You also looked at some of the polls involving the swing states. What did you see there?
A number of sort of the post-convention swing state polls have come out, and the picture is sort of similar to what we saw in the national polls. Pennsylvania, a double-digit lead for Hillary Clinton. Colorado and Virginia, double-digit lead for Hillary Clinton. Iowa is sort of closer than you would expect. The states where they're still sort of within striking distance, Ohio, although Hillary Clinton does have a lead outside the margin of error there. And Florida is probably the closest of the two where Trump and Clinton, I'd say that still looks like a tie. But overall, given the inherent advantage that the Democrats would have going into this year with the Electoral College, if they just carry the 18 states that they did in the last 6 presidential elections, they would start with 242 electoral votes. They only need 270 to win. If all those states go that way, that would forebode a very big electoral college win for Hillary Clinton.
The general election still a couple months away. Does Donald Trump have time to turn this around in the polls?
It is still 85 days away. One of the things this year that was a little different than other political years is the conventions were much earlier, partly because of the timing of the Olympics this year. So we do have more time between the conventions and the general election this year. We're getting into late August, right around Labor Day, is when traditionally people think the races, voters come back from vacation, start to pay attention again. There are still the debates, and then there's always the notion of could there be any sort of October surprises. So there is time, and it would be foolish to call any election based on August polling, but that window will narrow, and if they stay in this direction, that will be a big problem for Donald Trump's chance to win the presidency.
John